y'all, and welcome to the Healthy by Heather Brown podcast, where I encourage you in healthy mind, body, and spirit through my Sunday reset. Let's get into it. Hey girl gang, and welcome back to another episode of Healthy by Heather Brown. You guys are in for a treat, and I am in for a treat because y'all, I swear the Lord just has the most perfect timing worked out. I had asked Birds and the Bees to come on the podcast a while back. Well, then as life would have it, I got sick. I ended up having to cancel on them. And then meanwhile, my church behind the scenes was orchestrating that we were going to do an online course of theirs called Birds and the Bees Takes Flight with Ridley and Michelson. And y'all, it was just an honor to sit there with my husband and get on the same page about how we want to talk about sex with our boys, what that looks like. So I got to hear from them, learn from their wisdom about how to train up and equip young kids about sex and what that means in God's design. But then y'all, now I'm rescheduled and I've gotten to do their whole course at my church. And now I get to ask them all my personal questions. So welcome to the show, Megan and Mary Flo. And I just am so pumped for today.
Well, we're excited to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
I know the time worked out perfectly. So we're really happy to be here.
Yes, for sure. Just to give a little bit of context, so people are just listening to this and not hearing us, will you tell us how old you guys are, or not how old you are, but you can if you want to, but how old your kids are, and then if you have grandkids, and just how Birds and the Bees got started?
Sure. Mary Flo?
Great. So I'm celebrating my 72nd birthday this year. My husband and I have 3 grown children. They're all married and they each have 3 children. So we have 9 grandchildren. Some of them live in the Southeast, Greenville, South Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina. And then our son and his wife and their 3 live here in Dallas with us. So we have a busy, happy life and lots of babies to care for.
Y'all do, no kidding. So Mary Flo, you now have Megan with you who's helping you with Birds and the Bees. So Megan, tell us a little bit about how old your kids are and how you and Mary Flo intertwined. And I will give the caveat that Mary Flo is not Megan's mom, because I made that very clear in the video. So they are not.
Because I think a lot of people assume that. And, you know, it's not like we look like opposites by any means. But anyway, it's a very normal assumption. But we always laugh of like, we know this is a weird job, but it might be weirder if it was mother-daughter. I don't know. But maybe not. I don't know. Wait, that's I don't want to be mean about that. But anyways, I joined Mary Flo almost 10 years ago.
I know.
Which is really wild to say that out loud, because I was pregnant with my middle child who turns 10 this spring, when we kind of had we didn't know it at the time, but a moment where in passing, I grew up with Mary Flo's family. And so I knew her children really well and I knew her really well, but just as Mrs. Ridley. And I did not know any of this the secret sex job we had. And so I was teaching middle school. I was a middle school teacher before I had children of my own. And she had come to speak to the parents. Anyways, very long story short is I was just so impacted. And looking back, that was just the Lord, the first time he really put this message on my heart, and kind of this feeling of everyone has to know this. You've got to share this message. And I didn't know this has become this, Instagram talking head sharing message, but here I am. But anyways, and then years later, I ran into her daughter who said, my mom kind of wants to take a step back a little bit, but I don't want to do this. And neither does my sister, because 10 years ago was when we first sat down. Actually, we're at Mary Flo's house right now recording, and we sat right over there. And I said, I think I kind of want to train under you and, do at the time wasn't called Birds and Bees, and she was like, yeah, I think you're the right person. And I was pregnant, my second, very pregnant. We actually lived in a foreign country at the time. So nothing made sense, but we both had this feeling, and she had been praying for somebody to take over for like 10 years. And it was just, I had this sense of peace of like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do.
Wow. What a God story. 10
really.
Years of answered prayer. And that was you, Megan. How cool.
Yeah, it's wild.
I knew her all along.
That's the thing. I was like, you did this? I don't know. Anyways, long story short, we moved home from Peru, which is where we were. And I started training under her 10 years ago, 10 years of this fall. And just so, taking in all of our knowledge and just listening to the program over and over again. And then started speaking on my own. And so then we were both speaking. And then with COVID, we kind of morphed into online stuff. But I now have 3 children of my own. Spring is like birthday season for us. So we're almost 11 and a half, 9 and a half, 6 and a half.
Okay. Awesome. So you have some that are right around my ages. For those of you that don't know, Leighton and Finn, I have 2 boys. They're 9 and 6. And so we are very much so in such a great age to be doing the birds and the bees literature. For people that aren't familiar with birds and the bees, Mary Flo, will you tell them just a little bit about how did this vision of starting this come into your mind? And what were, I guess, the major pain points that you were hearing either from your kids or from parents of, school kids? It's just such a unique thing to do, especially in the Christian space. So I can't imagine how scary that might have been to even get it started.
I was so naive. I did not know what I was doing, but I at that time, I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. The 4-year-old was asking questions that I thought, I don't know, can I answer that? Like, how did that baby get out of there? And I grew up in a family where the word sex was never said, or how birth happened, or I didn't know about periods till I started mine. Like, I had wonderful, loving parents. But in those days, I grew up, I was born in 54. So in the 60s, people did not speak of this at all. So my parents weren't the oddballs, but it was just the norm. So you just grew up wondering, and you got resources on your own, and it was just kind of a blank page.
Yeah.
So when my children started asking those questions, I thought, can I answer? I know the answer, but what do I say? What does that sound like? I don't know. So I kind of punted for a little while. And then I got an assignment through the Dallas Junior League, and because I was a trainer with them. And anyway, I started looking into this topic. Well, what should we be saying, and when should we be saying it? Or I thought about it and actually prayed about it a lot and looked at Genesis a lot. I thought there's no reason to hide these things from our children or wait till they're the awkward age that we've decided the talk should be. So that when I stepped back and looked at it, I thought, there's just got to be a better way. And so taking notes from Genesis, and also just talking to pediatricians, talking to school counselors, talking to elementary school teachers, every teacher would say, oh, actually, they come with a lot of knowledge if they have older brothers and sisters. So they were giving me a lot of information, talking to pastors. And anyway, just it helped me formulate a way to break up the idea of the talk into little nodules, or, little conversations, lots of little conversations instead of the one big talk. And that just made a lot of sense to me. So because I didn't have schooling in this, because I wasn't an expert in any capacity, I was just a stay-at-home mom, I just walked down the road that the Lord opened up for me, just to speak to parents, just to share what I had learned. And then I kept being asked to come back. And It seemed to be something that resonated. So
absolutely.
Long story.
No, I so appreciate that. And I think that it's such cool insight, because some of the things that you said, I'm sure parents are like, yeah, how do we answer those questions? So Megan, in the videos, you did such a good job of explaining. So first of all, I feel like if you're not familiar at all with the birds and the bees, one of their first big things that they say is that you need to come up with, I'm like, golly, I'm getting so far ahead of myself. So y'all rein me back in whenever you want to. But essentially, you need to come up with your family mission statement around sex. So that's kind of part one. Another big thing that Mary Flo just harped on was that it's so important to break it up into smaller conversations. So you're constantly seeding that information versus just maybe like some of our parents did, having the one big talk and then like never mentioning it again. And then you not feeling like your parents were a safe space to go to. And I know that so many of the women that listen to this podcast are very involved in their church. And so it almost might be a little bit taboo. So Megan, with all that said, I thought you did the most amazing job of making the story of how a baby gets out of the belly sound just magical. Like it truly was dazzling. And so I want you, if you don't mind, just like you did on the video or go improv or whatever, share, like if my 6-year-old came up to me and said, Mommy, oh my gosh, Miss Sierra from the gym's baby just came out. How did that baby get out? What would you say?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked. I'm going extra here, but to your own personality, answer the question. But we really want to affirm to our children they have come to the right place, or affirm their curiosity and confirm they've come to the right place. We want to answer in a way that doesn't shut down the conversation, because to your point, I think so often parents are just uncomfortable with this. and think, well, if they're going to ask about that, then what are they going to ask about next? And I can't say the word uterus. And, we just kind of panic, say, oh, the doctor took the baby out. Move on, But again, and if you're sitting here listening, think, well, that's what I told him. That's not a terrible answer. This is
not untrue.
It's not untrue. Right. I don't know. But the point is, you have so many opportunities. So not only do we want to get rid of the talk and replace it with a lot of little conversations for so many reasons, but one of those reasons is it gives you as a parent the confidence to say, okay, I messed up last time, but next time I'm not going to. I just said doctor last time, but I'm going to bring it up again. So for the birth story, I think you can just look for keywords that you want to hold on to and kind of help them see the beauty of this. Particularly if you're a believer, you want them to see the beauty of God's design. Well, did you know that baby is not inside mommy's tummy? It's actually in a special place that God designed called the uterus. This is so exciting. Want them to know, like, wow, and only mommies have a uterus. So, it can be confusing for them if how come daddies can't have babies and stuff. So we all kind of a friendly reminder that uterus is not a bad word. I think so often we're like, you can't say it. Can't get it out. Or womb, we say womb is from the Bible. So there.
Yeah.
But the baby comes out of the uterus, travels through the birth canal. It comes out an opening between the mother's legs called the vagina. The baby's here. It's so exciting. Oh, it's so cute. Talk about the umbilical cord and how they snip the umbilical cord. And that's how the baby got its nutrients. There's so many ways to weave in details and make this a very exciting story. And same thing with the C-section. I think it's important to explain both. So, and sometimes the babies will wiggle and not go towards the birth canal, but the doctor knows this and makes a slit, so all these exciting terms, and that's called a cesarean section. And so really what you're doing is helping them see, wow, the story of birth is amazing. And wow, our bodies were designed to do this. And whether that baby is born vaginally or whether that baby is born through a C-section, that is a miracle. And that's amazing. And so the story of birth, we really try to encourage parents to delight in that story because it really helps them know that you have the answers, you're the expert, and that is who they go to for these answers.
Yes. And I love that you guys make a point to say, don't shy away from using the bigger terms like uterus, vagina, contractions, all. And I loved even how she started the story in the video of saying, like, the mommy's tummies, the muscles around the womb will start to move and contract. And that's what tells the baby it's time to head towards the birth canal. And it's like, I would not have thought of wanting to use those technical terms with little kids, but you're right. It shows them, I know what I'm talking about. I've got all the magical words. I know all the things. So you come to me, boo-boo.
And I think not only does it make you seem like the expert, which you are, you want them to realize, okay, wow, she knows what she's talking about. And I also think as parents, it gives us that confidence of, I just said birth canal or umbilical cord and nobody left the room. It kind of helps you as a parent get your confidence, get your feet wet, however you want to say it, a bit, to realize I can have these conversations and they're okay.
And the emotions are around the beauty and not around the scary terminology.
Yeah, so good.
Because I think that's what parents are dreading, but they don't have to dread that part. And so they can just say it. Maybe you practice it once or twice, just saying those words out loud if you've honestly never said them out loud. But this is one thing too, is that we really are on a mission to take babies out of the digestive system and put them in to the reproductive system, or, where it's tummies and like just so general and vague, and children have tummies and boys have tummies, and it's fine to use the word tummy. That's just socially acceptable, but they need to know what the real word is, and that only women have that.
Well, and one thing that I loved about y'all's course is just how tactical and practical you guys are. So one thing that you guys kept talking about was don't be afraid to circle back. So when I heard that, I was like, yeah, I'm totally the mom that was like, that baby's in her tummy. Isn't that so sweet? But I never used any of the real words. And so I even got the opportunity later on, because there is actually a trainer at our gym that is pregnant right now. And so I was like, boys, did y'all see Miss Sierra's sweet baby in her, belly that we've talked about before? Do y'all remember how we talked about that last time? And they were like, yeah, that's so exciting. When's the baby going to get here? All the things. And I was like, I just wanted to tell you, I told you that it was in her tummy, but actually now I feel like you're ready to know even a little bit more. And it's actually called the womb inside her tummy that's holding that baby in and keeping him or her safe until it's time to come out. And I was like, okay, I can do this. It was like my first moment of like, I can circle back and I do know what to do. Yes.
And circling back is like such a comfort. like you're not done. They still live with you. They're in your car. They're all around you in all these situations. And so it's just so natural. Plus, it is a good example to them. Oh, I have a question I can circle back to.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've just modeled how we continue the conversation.
So good. Will you share, Mary Flo, your, and forgive me because I can't remember exactly what you call it, but your almost like mission statement for your family around what sex is? And then Megan, will you also do the same thing? And will you explain the importance of that to parents about getting on the same page with their spouse as well?
Well, we just feel like the first step is really not to just move towards your children if you're not ready, that you really have to ready yourself, and you have to think through. I sort of compare it to sometimes we do things just the way our parents did, whether we liked it or not. We just don't know any other way. And so sort of stop the train. What was done well? What baggage do I want to take off? What do I want to add on? How do I want to then send this message down to my children? I had a blank page, so I didn't know where to start. My parents didn't do anything wrong, but they just didn't do anything. So I thought, what is the purpose of these conversations? Where are we going with these conversations? And so, like you said in that discussion guide, Takes Flight, we want to give parents a time and space to talk it through with each other. So we have a list of questions that they can answer together and see where they're not exactly on the same page and where they are on the same page, and how can we come to being on the same page or close to it. And so this is not the details of what you're going to be sharing with your children. This is more, what is my goal in having these conversations? When our children leave our home, which they eventually do, what do you hope is in their mind? What is the purpose of sex? So for our family, this statement, we wanted it to just be one sentence. We encourage parents to make this one sentence, so you have to really reduce it down to its essentials, because we wanted to share the beauty and also the boundaries of sex. We wanted we came up with the sentence, sex is a gift from God intended for marriage.
Love.
It's a very short sentence. It doesn't cover everything for sure, but it gives us a way to go back and talk about the gift that it is, to speak about it in a way of beauty, but also marriage sets up a boundary. And that's something we want to talk about too. Originally, we had said sex is a gift from God for marriage. And then we realized, okay, there are some people, because of the brokenness of our world, having sex outside of marriage. So we said intended for marriage. We just kind of modified that a little bit. So you can write it, you can change it. But it's basically, it really has to be, we know this will be different maybe from family to family, but that's where we want you to know, like birds and bees is not a cookie cutter situation. This is what you have to say, and this is when you have to say it. It's a lot more, this is for you and your children. You modify this to fit how your verbiage, your personality.
Mary Flo, will you also share, and then Megan, I want to hear yours next, but will you also share the story from the guy in the grocery store and his phrase? I thought it was awesome and so funny. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do. Okay. So we were talking about how you could have a health-based message. Let's say you didn't want to have a biblical message, but you just wanted to talk about sex is something that two people who are in love consent to do in a healthy way. Those are going to be different conversations in that family, right? But a dad of two little girls had a message, and he had come to the program and he said, well, we've got our message. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, this is what we want our girls to know. Sex is like that plug over there. You touch it, you die.
I bet you some of the people listening, and maybe myself as well, that might resonate as the way that I was taught growing up as well.
Everyone's like, yeah, I'm going to write that down. That's my message.
That's it. That's what I want to know.
That's what it's going to be. But anyway, reining us back in. Megan, what is you and your husband's family message around sex?
So ours really is the same as Mary Flo's. We, through all these conversations, really decided that we wanted to have a biblical understanding of sex and to present that to our kids through beauty and boundaries, which was a theme that we talk about, but living in a broken world, right? So this is something really good that God has made. these are the boundaries in which he's put around it for our goodness, our protection. Yet we live in a broken world. And so how can we navigate all these things? And so I think that essentially encompasses our message is we want it to be a biblical understanding that this is a gift and these are the boundaries intended for our good, and kind of having those open conversations that go back to that. And I think the family message, I think some people can get really hung up on like, what do they want to say? And what is my specific phrasing? But really it's just kind of a roadmap. It kind of gives you a game plan because these questions come at you so fast and you don't really know exactly how you're going to answer them all, or as they get more convoluted, as they get older, what does this mean? What does the slang term mean? Well, how am I going to handle X, Y, or Z? To kind of step back and people, what is my family message? Where am I going with this? Okay, if I'm really telling them that sex is for marriage, then this probably doesn't fall in line with that. So I think it's important to just view it as like a big picture, kind of your overarching theme here is this is what we believe. And it kind of is just it guides you towards these conversations, because the reality is our hope is that this is a topic that you're talking about a lot over the 18 years of raising your children. Yeah. And that's going to look different from every family. And that's what we say all the time. Obviously, this is a Christian platform and we're believers, so we're speaking very openly. But we have tons of families that follow us or take our program that aren't going to have a biblical understanding. And we fully acknowledge that it's a very personal topic, and so some people are going to want to put their own spin on it. And that's okay, but their vocabulary might sound different. Their messaging, their answers are going to sound different. But we really want to empower parents to take charge of this topic. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes for the Christian world and even the non-Christian world, we're really happy to farm this out. And we're really eager to put it on the youth groups or put it on the public school education or put it on the whatever. But one of our goals is to really empower parents to say, okay, what do I want my kids to know about sex? What do I believe about sex? How can I move towards my kids with this information through these conversations, however that sounds for my family.
Yeah. And I think you brought up so many good points. And one of the things that I would love maybe for you to even just speak a little bit of freedom into, I could totally foresee moms listening to this episode and then being like, gosh, I got to send this to my husband. We got to get on the same page about this. What would you say to the mom that is like, yeah, I am a believer. Yes, I want my kids to save themselves for marriage, to have sex. But I unfortunately did not do that, or me and my husband didn't do that. And so who am I to speak into that? Like, I'm feeling very overwhelmed or maybe shame right now. Do you mind maybe just speaking a little bit to that mom and encouraging her?
Well, we get that a lot. We get that question a lot. And what we want to tell these parents is these are your children and this is no longer about you.
Oh, yeah.
It's about them and their future. And so you need to kind of take a deep breath and say, I am their parents. As a result, I am qualified to teach to them. And when they're little, they're not going to ask you, so did you all wait? When they're older, they might. They might. So you have some time to think about it and pray about it. But basically, I don't think it's important that you share the details of your past, but to share maybe any lessons that your heart learned as a result of that.
Oh, I love that.
Let them hear your heart. Let them hear your, and not so much your shame or your past or your regrets, as long as, well, what did I learn from that regret that I want them to learn? I think it'd be wrong not to share the wisdom that you've learned, but really your past is your past, and you don't have to pull it up for your children. You don't have to run the tape for them.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Megan, did you want to add anything on that?
I would just say it's not a disqualifier. I think that's just like point blank. It's not a disqualifier because we're all broken people, right?
Preach. Yes.
So whether you waited or not, or you kind of went all the way but didn't, or whatever, it's like we're not getting in the weeds here. And so that is something that's not a disqualifier for us as parents. And so I think say, hey, this is what we want. This is what we believe God intended. And this is why. And this is what we're going to teach our children. And again, like Mary Flo said, if your story does have brokenness in it, that could be something you share with your children once they're older, or it could not. That doesn't have to be shared. I think that's not something that has to come up. But if it's a powerful part of your story, as your kids get older and they have that maturity, that could be something worth sharing. But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
But I think I would encourage moms and dads both, like just what Mary Flo said, is these are your children. So you are equipped. You are the person to talk to them. No, whether you think you are or not, you are. And regardless of what is in your past, you have every right to share with them the message that you believe in.
Yes, that's so good. And I feel like you guys are uniquely qualified to answer this question. So one thing that we talk about a lot here at Healthy by Heather Brown is that it's not just about being healthy mentally. It's not just about being healthy spiritually or even physically, but truly it is about the combination of all those things and how God designed us as a whole unique being and how all these systems that he created work together. And I think that so often, especially growing up in the Southern Baptist Church specifically, it felt like you don't touch sex and you don't look and you don't talk and you don't do anything. And then when you get married, it's like, go be a queen in the bedroom. And you're like, wait, what? So will you guys just touch a little bit on maybe what you feel like we could do as a church or as a body of believers? How can we start to talk about what sex means from a holistic, whole health perspective? And is it all interconnected within our whole, mental health, spiritual health, physical health, and how do we, even if you think it is, how do we then impart that type of thinking to our kids about why it's so healthy to wait until marriage?
Well, one way, and then I really want Megan to speak because I think you all are the same age and you did grow up with that really, really strong purity culture. And there was there were many layers that were part of that. That's hard to, navigate once you get married or, once you move on. But I do feel like this is something that you don't have to focus on the negative. As you're talking to your children, you can talk about the positive, but you can also say, this is something unique once you get married that you get to decide what is exactly right for you. It's going to be different from marriage to marriage. So the more details you learn, you need to understand the biology of it, but just know this takes a long time to grasp a hold of once you get married. It's not going to be, don't believe the lie that this is going to be perfect once you get married. That's like saying your first date will be perfect. It's a growing process once you get married that you get to work out with your spouse.
So good. Megan, I'm like, you probably did grow up in the same purity culture that I did. So I can't wait to hear your take.
I do feel grateful that I feel like I came out of purity culture without, I don't feel personally hurt by it, so I say this from this point of view, not to dismiss anyone that did. I think there was a lot of people who had a lot of hurt and damage from it. So just sharing my perspective before I speak. But I think a lot of what I would encourage parents to do is to speak in a way, and this is where I think having lots of little conversations about sex and putting in this message of, hey, this is a gift from God to married couples. This is not the gift. This is not the whole purpose of life. This is not your mark on eternity. It's like, this is a gift from God. Move on. Here we are, and I think by talking about it in this way with our children of like, hey, you know what that means? Yeah. Well, it has to do with sex. It's not really respectful to talk like that. Oh, that means, yeah, that's how baby's born. Like we're just kind of weaving this into a part of our life because I guess big picture, that's what we hope this is. We hope that sex would just become a part of their life in a healthy way. And I think sometimes that purity culture put it on a pedestal too much to be like, wait, just wait, because it is so, whatever. You're like, okay, well, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing, but like, it's not the thing. And so how confusing is that to lots of people who are married or even those who never get married? Well, how are they supposed to feel? It's kind of like, I think we having these conversations in kind of a matter of fact way, just like we talk about everything else, to let them see, like putting it in its right place. It's not disgusting and gross down here. It's not glorified up here, like the end all be all. It's right here. It's a good gift created for intimacy in marriages, for procreation, and moving on. Look at all these other gifts given us. And so how can we speak in a way that doesn't demonize it, but also doesn't glorify it, to kind of put it in its place? And I feel like sometimes the not speaking of it made it go to those two places.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I haven't thought about it like that before, but that's a really good point. And then also, I think that I wish that when I was younger, I would have been educated on like how like we were saying earlier, like, yes, this physical thing happens, but also God designed it so that then you would be more emotionally more reliant on that person. And also there's things that happen in your brain that truly almost like make you more fused to that person, because again, that was God's good design for marriage. And so that's why it's so important to wait, because it really is truly not just your physical body that's doing something, but it also is emotional and spiritual. And that at least is how I felt like within our marriage. And but it's hard to explain to kids, but I feel like there could be a cool way to do that to make it more educational and a health standpoint as well.
Well, and you can talk about how the decision to have sex is a very adult decision. This is an adult act. And so how do adults make decisions? So you just can walk through kind of in a class, like an academic way of, you don't just buy a house because you think it's cute. You know, you have to think, what do I pay for? What's the down payment? What do I pay today? And how long will I be paying for it? Cost. Mm-hmm. And so,
and what risks are involved?
What risks are involved? Like, let's put the pros and the cons. Just lay them out there. Also letting them know, sometimes you make a mistake when you make an adult decision, and we can receive grace when that happens. Sometimes we don't think it through. It's a very powerful thing, and you just make an emotional last minute decision. And when this happens, there's grace that can be a part of that, but not without consequence. But there may be consequences that be hard to live with, but we can do hard things. So it's like being able to talk about it in a way that's not so sensual, but it's a decision that you make. But sometimes you don't have time to sit around and think about it. You just do it. And then, wow, what happened? You know?
Yes.
So letting them know, because it is powerful, it can draw you in before you know it. So just, you know, it was meant to be powerful and beautiful.
And actually, now that you've said that, we talked about this before I hit the record button, but I was telling Mary Flo and Megan that we had on Kristen Jensen on the podcast last season. She is the founder of Defend Young Minds, and she's written two books. One's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and one is called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. And so just like we're talking about the draw of sex, and it really can like she calls it almost like a hack into your mind, what pornography can be. And so when you were talking about the pull of it, I thought, man, I really need to address that. I'm going to link that episode down in the show notes too, because while we're talking about sex for kids, it's also so important to educate your kids about the dangers of online. And inevitably, unfortunately, most kids these days are going to see pornography and way too early, and ways to address that, prepare them, because unfortunately, like we've talked about, we live in a broken, fallen world. So I'm going to link you guys back to that episode and those books as well, because I think those are really powerful tools within this conversation. And then I am going to change course just a little bit, but I wanted to get a little bit more to one of the things that you guys talk about with little kids, about how to start seeding the conversation with things like, you know, a seed and an egg. So will y'all talk some about that and how that has played out with your young kids or young kids that you're helping coach their parents?
Yeah, that's something we talk a lot about in our course, or share examples on Instagram. But this idea, again, we're breaking up the talk into lots of age appropriate conversations. And this concept of seeds and eggs is a really easy way for parents to kind of have these little by little conversations, or we like to call them drip, drip, drip conversations. And little seeds and eggs conversations can sound, you know, the big idea is that seeds create new life and eggs create new life. And that is kind of just the idea we're planting, pun intended, in our little kids. You know, it's like, and you're in the kitchen, you're dicing up a bell pepper or something. Oh my goodness, look at all these teeny tiny seeds, helping them cultivate a fascination with the way things grow, and letting them see that these teeny tiny seeds make new bell peppers. You know, they don't make apples. You know, these little bell pepper seeds make new bell peppers. Isn't that amazing? You know, or the springtime, you know, be purposeful with your words in the backyard. You get those little seed packets from the grocery store and put them in the soil. And isn't it amazing? These little seeds are going to create beautiful new life. You know, and the same thing with eggs, whether you have a chicken coop in your backyard or you just read books from the library, you know, but these little eggs are creating new life. And so what it is, it's kind of giving you a foundation for future conversations about human reproduction, which also involves seeds and eggs, and obviously seeds being the sperm. So a lot of times people will say, well, how come you don't use the word sperm? You know, if we're going to be accurate, why do you say seeds when it's really sperm? Well, I think the most simplest answer is because there's not a lot of sperm, Lord willing, laying around your house. There's not a lot of examples to talk about, right? So we're going to say seeds, which is fairly accurate, because then we can connect the dots with these little kids. Look at this apple mommy just cut open. Look at these apple seeds. Deep inside this apple are teeny tiny apple seeds. Look at this pumpkin we're carving for Halloween, because there are lots of examples that we can use in their world about seeds, and letting them connect that deep inside every living thing is part of what it takes to make the next living thing just like it. And that is true for pumpkins. That's true for people, and so that is an idea that they can grasp. And so when they get older, introducing you the word sperm, that's great. But when they're little, the word seeds and eggs are very helpful to build these foundational ideas. And it's so many conversations you can be having with them that kind of helps connect the dots, and that allows you to kind of have, babies come from seeds and eggs. So what you're doing is, I think sometimes people hear birds and bees and, we target parents with kids ages 1 through 10. And they think, you mean my 3-year-old needs to know what sex is? It's like, no, we're telling you to start the conversation, start the back and forth, talk about seeds and eggs, talk about how a baby's born, talk about private parts, use those anatomically correct words, these little by little drip, drip, drip conversations. Because that's the most important thing, is we want these conversations to start happening when they're young. Because you can have so many conversations between ages 1 through 10 before you really even dive into the real deal.
Yeah. And so, Megan, another thing, I'm going to put you on the spot again, but you did a great job of being like, this is what sex is on the video. So let's say my kid is 10 years old. They still don't know what sex is. And then they come to me and they're like, hey, Mom, somebody on the bus said sex. And keep in mind that I asked her to address that to a 10-year-old, not to a 5-year-old. So, right. And actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, do you mind addressing how you would say that if your 6-year-old kindergartner asked you that versus your 10-year-old? Can we hear that difference?
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember with both conversations is this might be your first conversation about sex, but it's not your last.
Yeah.
So don't feel the need to write down every word I'm about to say, because it might sound different for you. And you might not say the whole penis vagina thing, and that's okay, but you might do that in a couple months, And so I think there's freedom in knowing this might be the first time I talk to my child about this, but it is not the last. And so gone is this pressure to say every single thing I've ever wanted them to know. So with a 6-year-old, you might say, how'd the baby get in there? Oh, a part of a mom and a part of the dad made a baby. Something super simple like that. Or as they get older, a seed from the dad and an egg from the mom get together, and that's what God uses to start the baby. Or if more point blank, Mom, what is sex? Sex is actually a word that's meant to describe how babies are made. And you can stop right there. And then if they ask again, well, then you can introduce body parts where the bodies fit together. Oh, well, the penis goes in the vagina. So there's lots of ways to have this conversation, to break it down, that I think gives parents the freedom to realize, I don't have to say, well, sit down, son. I've got a lot to tell you. This. And if you hear about this one on prom night, you better, it's like, whoa, this can be a little answer. And then you can circle back in a few weeks. Do you remember that word we talked about? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this, because you might hear some confusing things out there. Before you go to summer camp, I want to tell you a little bit more about this. And so I think your answers can be short and sweet at every age, but just to have the understanding that they don't end. I think so often we get messages from people like, oh, I did it. I had the penis vagina conversation. To say, okay, that's great. Like, that really takes a lot of courage, but I hope you do it again. And I think that is the kind of the learning curve that we're trying to teach people from birds and bees is this, it keeps going. I can't tell you how many times, or not how many times, but I have, with my older children now, we've talked about the word sex. I know what sex is. And then I remember one time I could tell you where I was on the street driving to a specific bird. I did the whole thing.
I think you called me.
Yeah. Because it felt like a big moment for me personally. It felt like a big moment professionally. It was just oh my gosh. I'm without fail, 6 months later, maybe a year later, the question came up again. And she looked at me like, so what's that? I was like, you remember? And that moment? Because I think it made me start going gray. You don't remember that at all? I got wrinkles because of that. Nothing. Kids really are just kind of okay. And that to me was a marker in my life. And they don't even remember. So I just started over again, so it's
wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. Cool. And so I think it's just important to remember as parents, two things. One is you're going to explain this a lot. And just to kind of have these little drip, drip, drip conversations. And your answer to what sex is at 6 is going to be and should be different at 10, but maybe not that different if you've never talked to them before 10. So this is, we're very hesitant to say, okay, when they're 6, say this.
Yeah.
When they're 8, say this, because that is just not the way it works in families. But the other flip side to remember is when you are explaining what sex is, to remember that we are adults. Okay. We are post-pubescent, hormonally charged, probably sexually active people that have a lot of baggage. Right. And so we say these definitions, we explain these acts, and whoosh, it all comes to the front of our brains. And we are thinking about this in this very sensual definition, where our children, our prepubescent children, are taking it as facts,
Information.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, most often they're not like, wow, God's design, beautiful. That's not typically the answer you get. It's more like, whoa,
when can I do this?
Yeah.
No,
I'm like, ew,
not me.
What?
Yeah.
And then we always say like, that's okay. That's a great response for a child because it's not for kids.
Yeah.
We can confirm their age appropriate response and know that we're going to talk about this again. And so I think so often parents get so hung up on doing this perfectly. And like, when's the perfect age?
Mm-hmm.
When's the perfect moment? What are the perfect phrases? And I think it's like, that's not the attitude we want you to have. We want you to have, I'm going to fumble my way through this, but we're going to just keep talking. And I want my child to know I'm going to establish myself as a safe place.
Yes.
And I want to know that they can come to these questions. And if I kind of messed up in the car today, I'm going to circle back to that night when I'm tucking him in and say, sweetie, you asked me a really good question in the car today, and I just didn't give you my best answer. I was so distracted, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's more of like an attitude, I would say, is what we really want to instill in parents at Birds and Bees, is to equip them and empower them to realize you can have a voice on this topic, and your kids desperately need to hear that voice.
Oh.
So look ways to speak into this topic.
That's so good. And I am going to ask you this, and it's kind of a hot button. So y'all can just be like, I don't want to talk about that, or we don't cover that in our course or whatever. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask you now, as believers, what is a good frame of reference that parents could just hear you give as an example of, I saw on TV a girl was kissing a girl. What was that about? Or there's this girl in my class that says she's gay, Mom. What does that mean? How do y'all answer that? And again, I know it's not going to be you write down exactly what they say and like that's going to work for your child, but I think it would just be helpful to hear how that plays out from y'all's teachings.
Well, it's complicated, so it's like, where do I start with this? Mm-hmm. When children are very young and they come home and say, there's a friend in my class and he has 2 daddies. Mm-hmm. So part of you wants to sit down and totally clarify that for them, totally bring out the biblical response, or let them know this is not how it works. Let them know biologically that cannot happen, but they're little. And that's a lot to carry. So you need to also reflect on your child's maturity, and also think about that other child and the community that they live in that classroom. You need to back up just a little bit and we would say, of course you can do this however you want to, but we would say, consider, can your child hold 2 things? Can your child with equal weight hold grace and truth? Mm-hmm. Like, I love this person. I like this person. I care about this person, but this person is not doing exactly the way God designed things to be. When they're little, they're really black and white. This is either wrong or right. Mm-hmm. And I can't, like, you have to hate the enemy, or, this is the bad guy and we're all against them. So that's a maturing process. Not that it becomes right, but it becomes something you can see that, like you said before, we're all broken. We all go our own way. We all have these things in our own lives, our stain of sin and that needs redeeming. But we don't have to point out the most complicated thing to our young children. So with all that being said, we start with young children by just introducing the idea, sweetie, all families are different.
Love that. Yeah, that's very good.
And that doesn't mean you're never going to tell them exactly how that plays out in the future. But just, that family has all girls. We've got all boys. That family, the mommy, so sadly, their mommy died, and their grandmother and the daddy are all helping to raise those children. Mm-hmm. So help them to see that they're being introduced in early elementary ages to lots of different family settings. And also be aware that, they're going to school with the oldest brother of anyone in their classroom. Like some of the information they're getting, it's because your firstborn is going to school with their fourthborn. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So some mature material can come into your child's classroom, but that doesn't mean he's able to hold that. So you want to ease into that topic.
That's really
and something
good.
to add to that is, like your child come home, elementary school, it says, mommy, what is gaming? A phrase that we say a lot is ignorance is not the same as innocence. And I think, I'll say that again, ignorance is not the same as innocence, because I think sometimes in our attempt to protect our children from things we don't want them to know or phrases we don't want them to hear or whatever, we say nothing, doesn't mean anything, or, whatever your response is. But a simple definition doesn't take away their innocence. You can simply define that and say, well, what does our family believe? Or what does the Bible say about that? Or what do you think about that? How, that's interesting. We live, this is the beauty. These are the boundaries. We live in a broken world, all these things. So there are ways to define things that doesn't take away their innocence. It's like if a child says, what is divorce? That's something you probably were like, I wish I wouldn't have to explain that to my child. But the reality is it's around us.
Right.
And some of the people involved in those situations didn't want to be there either. And so as believers, we can move towards these situations and define things to our kids in our own way that doesn't take away their innocence, but it doesn't shield them completely to be like, oh, bad word, we don't say that, And so I think it's just a good reminder as parents just to motivate you to speak up, be that voice, fill your child's sponge, let them hear your definition, let them hear your words. Don't be afraid of these words because you think it's going to take away their definition, but to motivate you to have those conversations. Because if you say nothing and say, oh, nothing, that's a bad word, don't say that, then they're going to figure it out from somebody else.
They have lots of ways they can get answers.
For sure.
And you.
Yeah, so good.
Well, to not avoid your question, I would say when they are old enough, you could say, this is when a woman loves a woman the way God intended for a woman to love a man. But if you define it that way, then you also have to be ready for them to not go to school and say your parents are doing something, but like that they can be able to hold that, but also let them, because we are all broken, let them hear truth, but see you act in love. Mm-hmm. So if you have a gay couple down the street, you don't ostracize them. They're part of they're your neighbors. When they're sick, you take them a meal. They see you tell the truth, but act in love.
Oh, yeah. So good. You guys, I can't believe how quickly we have run out of time. This is so good and so much just tangible, helpful information. I can't thank you enough for your willingness to sit in with us today. I ask every guest as I close out this same question, so I'll ask it to y'all too. But I would actually specifically like to ask you about it in your marriage, because we are talking about sex, or honestly, because this is the healthy marriage season, if you'd rather, though, answer about how to do this as your family, I'm open to that too. But how do you?
I don't know what you're about to say.
You're like, what? Where's this going?
Yeah.
Trust me, this is the easiest question you're going to get this whole hour. So, Mary Flo, I'll ask you first. How do you and your husband, or you and your family, hit the reset button? We talk often around here about my Sunday reset, and that's where we just intentionally choose how we're going to spend that week. And it looks different for everybody how they reset. But I'd love to hear the answer for either you and your spouse or you and your family.
I think the way that we set the reset button, because we have a lot of grandchildren and we love to take care of them, is it's just so simple. Just don't forget to carve out time just for the two of us, because we love family vacations, and family vacations are a blast and wonderful and include everybody. And it's so interesting to see how our children are parenting and focus on our grandchildren. But we need to take an annual trip, just the two of us, which that's not a weekly reset. But I would say for Dave, it's playing golf. For me, it's needle pointing. So we have our own kind of separate, I'm just in my own space now. Don't interrupt me.
Yes. That's so good.
And old movies and needle pointing is an unspiritual way of resetting. Obviously, Bible study and worship and all of that is the most important reset, but just kind of take a breather. Those are kind of what we do.
Great answer. See, that wasn't that hard. You did great. Megan?
Yes, yes.
The Lord works in all things. So we are in the thick of it, as you are, with 3 little kids at home and all the things. We got a new dog. So now we have a dog in our life, right?
Fun.
Oh my gosh.
Christmas dog.
A Christmas puppy. Anyway, so how do we reset? I think obviously a date night is kind of an easy answer, but it's really hard to do as now our nights are becoming full of their activities. So we really try to just like carve out some intentional time to have undistracted conversations. It does sound very simple and unromantic, but it's hard. If like the kids are up later, we're moving around. So to kind of look ahead of the calendar, typically on a Sunday, we try to sit down and think, okay, you know what? Maybe we can meet for lunch on this day. Or, Thursday night, let's, have a date night at home, or let's see if we can get a sitter next Friday. I mean, really just trying to be intentional about it. And that looks different every week. I wish I could say, oh, we go out every Wednesday night. Well, that's not happening in this season, but there's still ways to reset. And I think what that means for us is undivided attention. And so sometimes that means a walk around the block. Sometimes that means a lunch date. Sometimes that means stay on the couch without phones or TVs on. So for us, trying to really fight for that. I think that we're in a season where it's hard to get that because we're both tired and busy and all that stuff. But I think a good reset for us is prioritizing undistracted time.
I love that. And I love that you said undivided attention, because it's not even necessarily, like you said, the actual date night, but it's the undivided attention that is what really matters. So that's awesome. Well, you guys, it was a joy to have you. I would love to ask you just to tell everybody where they can get all the birds and the bees information they want to find.
Okay. I'm going to just add one footnote because I don't know, this just keeps popping in my brain, but there are parents out there, moms saying, but my children never ask. And so we just want to give you this one helpful phrase. You don't have to wait for them to ask. Many people think, well, wait for them to ask, and they never ask. But you can go to them. You can be the initiator. And a good question that we think works is to say, sweetheart, have you ever wondered exactly how that baby got out of there? So whatever it is that you think it would be age appropriate to tell them, but they've never asked, move towards them with that question.
Okay, Mary Flo, it's so funny that you had that prompting to say that, because all along I've been thinking I need to say this and I haven't yet. I had a therapist that I interviewed on the podcast at some point. Now I can't remember who it was, but they said kids will always ask questions up until the point that they feel comfortable. So they were like, if they're asking the question, then they're probably ready for at least part of the answer. And then they said, but at the same time, when they're quitting asking questions, they're not really engaging as much anymore. It's kind of like, okay, my maturity and brain is full of what I can take right now. So don't force it on them either. And I just thought that is such good intel to have when I'm going into conversations, especially with boys who can tend to be like, I have 5 words to give in the next 30 minutes. So
exactly.
But I think that's a good note to end on is be the proactive parent. Move towards your kids with these topics that you might initially want to avoid. Like let them hear you. So move towards them even if they're asking questions or not. And for more talking tips, you can find us at birds-bees.com is our website online. That's for our online courses. If you want to buy that, you can watch it at home, watch it with your spouse. I think so often there's a question like, well, my spouse is not on board, or how do we get on the same page? And as someone who was once just a listener of Mary Flo Ridley, I came home and just word vomited everything I learned that night to my husband. We had a 6-month-old, and he looked like, okay,
are you kidding?
You want me to say vagina? Like, it makes so much more sense if you just hear the whole thing. And it's true. And so if you're sitting there being like, I like everything they're saying, but sit down and watch the course with your spouse, because it's so much more impactful to hear somebody else tell you this information than for you as a wife just, yak in your husband's ear. Yeah. So watch the course together. I think that's very, very easy way to get on the same page. So that's our website. And you can follow us on Instagram. We share lots of talking tips. I have a great community out there that also shares their stories, which I think is really helpful to hear from other parents. And that's at birds__bees. So we'll link the Instagram and online course. And then we have a code we want to share with you guys to give you a discount.
Yes. And the discount code, you guys, will be Heather. And you guys can use that on their website on the course, right? And so I'll put all that down below. But truly, Eric and I so enjoyed doing their course. And Eric wouldn't care if I said that, but I did bring him a little bit kicking and screaming to the course at the church. But I was like, no, you don't want to hear all this from me. Kind of like what you just said. We need to hear it together, and we need to be on the same page, because you're the man, and more than likely our boys will be asking you before me. So we got to be on the same page.
And did he
like it? Did he?
He did. He was like, okay, that was actually better than I thought it was going to be. And he laughed. And like, then I was like, listen, we'll even make a date night of it. I'll get a babysitter. And afterwards we'll go grab a drink at your favorite bar and we'll watch the game. And so then he was like, sold.
We do get that a lot. My husband was like rolling his eyes, like, why are we coming to this? I have an 8-year-old.
Right.
And then they leave being like, okay, that was funnier than I thought. And I'm going to let that one.
Yes, for sure.
I'm not totally delusional.
Yes. Okay. Well, y'all go check out the Birds and the Bees online. Check out their links. Use my discount code Heather. So grateful for that. Y'all have an awesome week and I'll see you next Tuesday. Friend, what if I told you that teaching your kids scripture could be easy, fun, and actually stick? My free weekly Bible memory plan for kids gives you one short, powerful verse each week, designed to fit into your crazy busy life. With 4 kid-friendly verses a month and simple ways to weave them into your daily routine, you'll be planting God's word in their hearts without it feeling like homework. Want in? Grab it now at healthybyheatherbrown.com/freebies with an S and start building a faith-filled family today. Okay, friend, that's a wrap on this week's episode. If you're not already following me on Instagram, make sure to screenshot this episode, share it to your stories, and tag @healthy_by_Heather_Brown so I can connect with you in my DMs. It truly brings me so much joy to see how these episodes impact you. Make sure to subscribe so we can see you back here next Tuesday for our weekly show. In case you don't know, your downloads, ratings, and reviews are the actual lifeblood of this podcast, and it helps spread the word to your friends and family. So please hit the download button on this episode and leave a 5-star rating if you super loved it. And if we're really BFFs, you'll spread the happy and text this podcast link to someone who needs to hear it today for some encouragement. Scroll down to the show notes on this episode to see any and all links mentioned, freebies to fuel your health goals, prayer-related episodes, and the 7-day free trial of my exclusive membership where I personally coach and cheer you on in whole health. While you're there, make sure to check out my Amazon storefront with healthy snacks, my favorite look for less workout outfits, and books and devotionals that challenge me in my faith. If you ever need to find my Amazon storefront, just Google Healthy by Heather Brown Amazon and it will come up. Have a great day, girl gang.